Welcome to this edition of Rattling the Bars. I'm your host, Mansa Musa. Do you know who Joanne Little was? Joanne Little was charged with the 1974 murder of Clarence Allgood, a white prison guard at Beaufort County Jail in Washington, North Carolina, who attempted to rape Little before she could escape. Little was the first woman in United States history to be acquitted using the defense that she used deadly force to resist sexual assault. Recently, 8 female prisoners dubbed the Rape Club by prisoners and correctional staff alike filed a lawsuit against the Federal Bureau of Prisons, arguing that sexual abuse and exploitation have not stopped in Dublin FCI despite the prosecution of the former warden and several former officers. The lawsuit filed in Oakland by attorneys representing prisoners and the advocacy group California Coalition for Women Prisoners also names the current warden and 12 former and current guards. It alleged the Bureau of Prisons and staff at Dublin facility didn't do enough to prevent sexual abuse going back to 1990. An Associated Press investigation last year found a culture of abuse and cover-ups that persisted for years at the prison. And what does the Me Too movement, garnering public attention, means in terms of attaining justice and relief for incarcerated women? Here to talk about the current state of Dublin FCI and related issues is Erin Neff, who is a legal advocate with California Coalition for Women Prisoners. Welcome to Rattling the Bars.
Thank you, Mansa. Good to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Yes, my name is Erin Neff. I work with California Coalition for Women Prisoners. We are a grassroots organization that has been active in the California prisons for the last 28 years. We began at Chowchilla with the CDCR giving support to a woman named Cherie Shoemate, who was advocating for the lack of medical care. Since then, she actually did not survive her illness, but she began a movement with us, with people on the outside, to create advocacy relationships. We have been working mostly with the CDCR system in the women's prison system, and we are currently, for the last few years, working at FCI Dublin.
Okay. And now, recently, an article came out or information came out about the current state of Dublin prison in Oakland, California, or in the Bay Area, as it relates to female prisoners being abused, sexually abused. We know that in the federal prison system, they have what is known as PREA, Prison Reform and Enforcement Rape Act. I think that's what it stands for. But the concept of PREA is that anyone under the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, anyone under any state or local facility that has an issue about being sexually abused or sexually assaulted by either inmates or staff, they had this mechanism where they can immediately contact someone, had a person that they alleging had done something to them, removed from the institution, and have the person that's making the allegation removed from the institution, and then an investigation going on. And in the interim of that, until that is resolved, these people are never put in the place together. But now, come to find out that in California, in Dublin in particular, in terms of like this particular incident, but it's known that this is far more reaching than just in Dublin prison. This is like I think I read somewhere say it's the culture of the prison system. Talk about Dublin. What's going to Dublin first? Let's talk about that and what's going on as far as the lawsuit and how this came about, and if you can give a historical context to it, if you have one.
Yeah, so PREA is the Prison Rape Elimination Act, and that should generally give a person who is experiencing sexual harassment or abuse a way to confidentially report this abuse, and that appropriate action and investigation will be taken against this person who is doing the abuse. In the case of Dublin, just to give it an historical context, 30 years ago, there was a horrific incident of abuse upon many people. And there was a big case and a big settlement. And it is heartbreaking to see that 30 years later, the same thing is happening. And what it exposes is a culture of turning a blind eye to this abuse. There's cooperation, there's cover up, it's very difficult to report, let alone confidentially report. So in recent times, what you're seeing are people being abused who are undocumented. So first of all, they're being targeted because the staff knows that they are people who are going to be deported. So there's an exposure there. They are threatened that if they say anything, they'll be deported. So these people are people who've been here maybe their entire lives, all of their families here. So the possibility that they will be deported, and I'm sure this staff lets them think that they have some sort of power as to whether they can stay or go. So there's that. They're being retaliated against by putting in isolation. They are getting strip searched. They are, it goes on and on. They're being deprived of medical care, of mental health care. These people have really suffered tremendous abuse. And on top of this abuse, they're being punished again by not getting the medication that they were once taking. That is a very common scenario where their medication that helped them survive in this place of incarceration, they're not getting the medical care, they're not getting counseling. In some cases, reports where they'll get minimal counseling, but it's with a man who is part of the staff. They do not feel safe at all. Their commissary is getting limited. Harassment in the middle of the night. It goes on and on and on. And while this has been exposed, Warden Garcia was found guilty and sentenced to 70 months for his abuse, this ongoing abuse. There was a chaplain, multiple correctional officers, counselors who were cooperating and giving information to those who were abusing, and they're giving people a way to target people who are more vulnerable, those, for example, who were undocumented. So you're seeing people transferred out of state if they do report. So they're getting transferred away from their families and their communities. It goes on and on and on.
And we're talking about, now we're not talking about Orange is the New Black. We're not talking about some HBO theoretical or theatrical rendition of what an ideal prison would look like in America. We're actually talking about real live human beings. But talk about the lawsuit, because so now we've got it reached critical mass to the point where we have a lawsuit. Let's talk about the lawsuit, and in talking about the lawsuit, has an injunction been leveled against the institution to cease and desist, and how are we able to, or how are you able to like get coverage for these women? Because as I said earlier, when as you outlined, that's like that type of fear permeates the population. When you're in a prison, and I've been in prison myself, I did 48 years. When you're in a prison environment and you don't have no control whatsoever to begin with, but the isolation really make you feel like you don't have no rights, and that whatever's going to go on with you that day or that point in time, either you're going to accept it or you're going to die trying to defend yourself. But at any rate, you're going to be subjected to some harsh, cruel, brutal treatment or mistreatment. Talk about the lawsuit, if an injunction is in effect, and how do these women get coverage where they can get a sense of security?
Yeah. So CCWP is the organizational plaintiff for this case against the BOP, along with many individuals. Currently, where it stands is we are waiting for a response from the BOP. It's currently a bit in what feels like a stalling stage on their part before the trial will be granted. So we're waiting on that. In the meantime, anyone who has is part of this lawsuit is also currently incarcerated. Some people have been released, but many are still incarcerated at Dublin or transferred. There's people that I am visiting are talking about being treated as less than human. Last week, I sat across from someone who is being denied her medical care, her mental health care. She feels completely forgotten. She feels completely hopeless. She's been subjected to isolation. If this is a real person with children, who she speaks to her children, and her children are so worried about her because her feeling of hopelessness. She's already paying for her debt to society. She's doing her time. And on top of that, she is being treated as less than human. And this isn't a TV show. These are real people.
Right.
And the effect on that individual, the effect on their families, their children, it's not isolated to that one person. So the hopelessness is very hard to fight against. What we try to do is educate them and inform them of what we are doing on the outside and that they are not forgotten. They did recently say that they saw us when we filed the lawsuit, and we had a demonstration out in front of the courthouse in Oakland, and that was extremely empowering for them to know about that people are active and that we are fighting.
And like you said, this is not no TV show. This is not no go back, act like you distraught, go back, put more emotion. No, this is the real life. But speaking on the outside now, and this is just my perspective, right? And we're talking about California, and we're talking about the Bay Area, but we're also talking about a state where if these women were in Paramount Studio, if these women was in some major corporation, if these women was in anywhere in society being subjected to this, the Me Too movement, the feminist movement, every ambulance chasing lawyer would be outraged, would be uproar, would be like identifying the warden, the corporate leader, and trying to get charges against them, trying to get them locked up, trying to get their monies, a lien on their monies. Do you feel like that it's a disconnect between these movements and women that are incarcerated? And if so, why? If you can talk about that.
Well, yes, there's a huge disconnect. Even in the Bay Area, people are not aware that this is going on. Unfortunately, what you see in the prisons, everyone knows, is we see brown people, Black people, and poor people, people who are already vulnerable, people who have suffered tremendous abuse. And a blind eye is turned to these people. This is a capitalist society where we value people who are seemingly of value, and it's a very, very tragic view on, even in California, where we are the most liberal state. You
Hmm.
see people turning away from this. It's incredibly painful to see that truth. People don't want to see that. They don't want to know that that is happening in California. Yeah, if you see someone on the outside, if this is not to minimize the tragedy of that recent expedition to go see the Titanic. Uh, these millionaires, billionaires spent a ton of money, and very tragically, they died in this accident.
Hmm.
And you see an outpouring of interest and focus on this. Why are these people who are incarcerated of less human value?
Right. And let's give a context to the people that are incarcerated, because the according to the judicial system and according to criminal law, uh, we have what we call crime and punishment. A person is charged with a crime. The punishment that they get is the amount of time they are to serve, not how they serve their time. The amount of time if I rob somebody and robbery occurred 10 years, the crime is I committed a robbery. The punishment is the 10 years. The punishment is not I'm sentencing you to 10 years to go be raped, sodomized, brutalized, terrorized, and then released. The punishment is that I'm gonna be sent to an institution that's the next phase of the sentencing process is, in the narrative is that I'm gonna be sentenced to an institution that's gonna provide me with the means and the mechanism to make the adjustment for my ultimate return to society. Not that what I'll be subjected to as a female, more importantly than anything else, be subjected to coming into an institution and the way the prison are. This is the prison culture in terms of how we look at people that's incarcerated. We know the institutions that we're going to. We know the way the institutions are ran. We know what goes on in these institutions prior to even getting there. They say, "Oh yeah, you going to Dublin." First thing I know is, "Oh, okay, I know that this is the way they, it's real abusive like this here. Women are being, I gotta be on the lookout for this. I gotta be on the lookout for that." And automatically, what happens is once I get into this environment, I'm automatically on the defense because I recognize that the abuse about the environment precedes itself. But talk about the women, and you talked about earlier about how some of the clients that you deal with are really being depressed, and rightly so. But talk about how we're able to get them to like hold on and have faith and be more spirited about the fact that not only this too gonna pass, but the people that's responsible gonna be held accountable. That's a fact, and we know that based on y'all organization and y'all organizing. But talk about how you're able to get them to hold on and recognize that they're not wrong for wanting to be human. They're not wrong for expressing their desire for their humanity. The people that's wrong is the people that's abusing them, that's been given the authority
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
abuse them.
that's right. Yes, I mean it's an excellent point. The punishment is the time you do, and your time in prison is supposed to include opportunities for rehabilitation. That is another thing, that people are allowed to do programming, and this programming can include, AA, NA,
Right.
ways to improve yourself, codependency. This is another form of retaliation in that they deprive you of getting to take those classes and be in groups and in community. So you are being doubly punished. What we try to do, we have in-person visiting where we are trying to meet as many people as possible and let them know that we are here. We have a writing relationship with them. They have access to email where we start to be in contact as much as possible. We use this as an opportunity to find out what is going on inside. Now, no email or phone calls are confidential, so it's not a guarantee that we can exchange real information. We have also a newsletter called The Fire Inside that CCWP has been publishing for 28 years. We have 3 issues a year. We send those to people in the CDCR as well as FCI Dublin. It's in Spanish and in English. We solicit information and content and poetry and stories from them to get their stories out so that they are heard. And last week in my visit, I shared the newsletter with many people, and it was great because it's also in Spanish, and I think it was quite stunning. And tragically, they are so moved because they are not used to having people acknowledge their existence and their suffering.
Right.
And
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the fact that that is happening and we are giving them voice, we want to know what's going on. We really want them to know that their stories are incredibly important and they are not suffering alone. And sometimes the only thing that we can do is, write a letter and say, we are here. How is your day going?
Right.
And that can make a huge difference. But things like the lawsuit is incredibly important. A demonstration in front of the courthouse when the case is filed. These things are incredibly important because it does get inside.
And we want people to recognize that we're talking about human beings. First of all, we're talking about people, human beings, but more importantly, we're talking about women. And the fact that in this society we dealing with chauvinist, sexist, racist, or bigger society, capitalist society. The fact that these things exist seem to overshadow what we're talking about when we're talking about people that were sentenced to serve time. The judge did not say, and when sentencing them, I'm sentencing you to 10 years in Dublin Federal Correctional Institution to be raped, sodomized, and brutalized, dehumanized, and hopefully by the time that you'll return to society, you'll be a shell of a woman. No, the judge sentenced these people, sentenced these women to a term of imprisonment and to be rehabilitated. But Erin, you got the last word on this here. How do we get in touch with you? What do you want our viewers to take away from this here? And more importantly, when you go back and talk to the sisters, tell them that we send out solidarity out and big hugs.
Thank you so much. And thank you also doing the shout out to women who are just a more vulnerable population. And most of the time, women end up in prison, have been system impacted, or they have been abused or trafficked and end up in these situations where they're getting abused even more. If you would like to get in touch with California Coalition for Women Prisoners, we have an advocacy program where we join people on the outside who are interested in reaching this population and doing advocacy and learning from the ground up. We are a grassroots organization. You can look at womenprisoners.org and send us an email and we will get you connected. We have orientations and trainings, bi-monthly meetings to support you in this work. It is a really big community of amazing, amazing organizers and people with tremendous heart who recognize that this problem, while isolated to what's happening inside of a building, inside of a prison, is impacting all of our lives. Our communities are being impacted, your neighbor is being impacted, and whether you feel it directly or not, it is. And we welcome everyone, and please come and check us out, womenprisoners.org. The women at the FCI Dublin would love to be in touch with you.
Thank you, Erin. And there you have it, the real news, Rattling the Bars. Erin, you rattled the bars today. We seen an event where the person threw their hat up in the air. And when he threw his hat up in the air, it was a moment where everybody came around in support. This is that kind of time. This is a throw your hat up in the air moment for women incarcerated throughout the United States of America, more so importantly in Dublin. Nobody has the right Nobody has the right to violate your body. Nobody has the right, because you're serving a sentence, to come in and say because you're serving time, or because you're considered an illegal alien, or because you're a woman, that I have a right to subject you to the most dehumanizing, inhumane treatment only because I got the authority. I got the right to rape you. I got the right to sodomize you. I got the right to deny you your medication. I got the right to deny you food. I got the right. No, you do not have the right. You do not have the right. The right is not given to you. The right that you have is to ensure that I'm in a safe environment. And when you subject women to this cruel and unusual punishment, you're going to be held accountable. And we see this being taking place now by the work that Erin and the sisters and brothers in California are doing. We ask you to continue to support the Real News and Rattling the Bars. It's only from the Real News and Rattling the Bars that you're going to get this kind of information. You're not going to get this information on ABC or CBS or NBC News, or you're not going to get this information from someone from the White House getting on the platform saying, yes, we find this problematic that women are being raped in prison and women are being sodomized in prison, and that we're paying money for this to make sure that they do it with impunity. No, you only get this information from the Real News and Rattling the Bars. And we ask that you look at this report. We ask that you investigate what's going on in the prison system, in particular in California. We ask that you take a stand. If you believe that raping people, sodomizing people, and abusing people are a good thing to do because they was convicted of a crime, then weigh in on that. But understand this here, if they come for you, come for me in the morning, they'll come for you at night. So you're not immune to it. You will be subjected to the same harsh treatment when it goes unchecked. Thank you very much, Erin, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for watching the Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work, so please tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to the Real News Network. Solidarity forever.